Hello, it's Dr. Buzz, and thank you for joining me with Team Teaching or Teaching with an Assistant. Now, this is going to be one of a few different teaching models or protocols. There's team teaching, so you have a lead teacher with an assistant who's throughout the class for everybody. We commonly see these in schools for special education or classrooms of special education. But it is still not unfamiliar for regular education classes. Number two is it's the team taught where you have the lead teacher and you have a teacher who's responsible for a group of students in the class. They're specifically designated to the assistant teacher with individual educational plans, or it could be 504 planning or formal or informal planning otherwise. Then we have the team teaching with a lead teacher, and then there's an assistant to a student where the assistant is specifically designed or instructed to oversee or supervise or instruct that student individually. So there are a couple different models, and you may have something that is similar but not quite the same or completely different, but I want to get the ingredients of this as consultant for schools all over the world. Every culture, we're talking every country, every state within the country, or every jurisdiction within the state, or district within the jurisdiction of the state, doesn't matter. However you define your teaching demographics, there is commonly the lead teacher, and there often, not always, but often, there can be an assistant to that class for whatever the reason. In order to make this situation profitable, the lead teacher has to be identified as the lead teacher. As much as I'm going to divide these up and you can understand them separately as to a lead teacher and another person or other people in the class who are there to assist, the key here is understanding that the lead teacher is the lead teacher. The lead teacher could be the licensed teacher, the certified teacher, the teacher who is most qualified to be there. There could be a secondary teacher who is also licensed, but is not the lead teacher. So the lead teacher is the person in control of the class. Now, as a consultant for so many schools for so many years, I give all the control to that lead teacher. Now, the control is still managed by having a school-wide for positive behavioral support model within the school. If you are a school, or we're talking about a class that does not have a school-wide for positive behavioral support infrastructure, the lead teacher is going to have to create that. Why is that? Because the parameters, the culture, the climate, the understanding, the boundaries, the expectations have to be developed by somebody. The lead teacher is the person who creates that. Now, within those expectations or within those defined norms of performance that we expect from our students, the lead teacher has to expect certain types of performance functions from the assistant or assistants to the classroom. So the lead teacher, in order to achieve those goals, must have goals him or herself to be defined in order for the assistant, let's call it assistant teacher, to be helpful to the class. Now, we have another person in that class for a reason. It's very important that the lead teacher has goals for this assistant teacher to help the lead teacher to achieve. So some of you may be a little bit confused. This is a lot of different types of information. But when you think about it, it's the same model. You have a person who is responsible for the integrity of instruction for that class. It also is a person who is in control and responsible for the integrity of the student management or behavior management of that class. And this has got to be achieved by the lead teacher training or grooming, or we could even say teaching those people who come in to support that class, so the lead teacher and anyone who's assisting are all on the same page. Otherwise, it's like having a mother and a father who are not on the same page, and then the child is deciding who the child wants to listen to. We can't have the lead teacher and anyone in the class to support the lead teacher not on the same page. It is a crisis just waiting to happen. And I see this all the time. Many lead teachers will say to me, but I'm not a qualified person to, communicate or manage others in my class other than my students. Well, then we got to be trained. I mean, if we're going to have another person in the class, we have to have management skills to be able to lead the assistant teacher to the class, because that assistant, if utilized properly or effectively, can be the greatest asset to you being a better teacher or a more efficient teacher to the students who you're responsible for. So what does all this mean? So I'm going to give you an example. In third grade, you might have a math class. And let's say the lead teacher's goal of this class is for the students to learn new content that needs to be defined by a lesson, and it will also include practice problems at the end. If that's the teacher's goal, then it needs to be the lead teacher's responsibility to share that with the assistant who's in the class, depending on who the assistant is responsible for. All the students in the class, a couple designated students in the class, or one student in the class. The assistant to that class has to be aware, which means the lead teacher is obligated and responsible for sharing with the assistant what are the goals. It might sound so easy, but in some classes, the goal might be, listen, we just need to keep these students under control. We just need people to listen without, acting out impulsively or distracting other people in the class who are trying. If the assistant to the class is planned and really understands, hey, the goal is to have all these students in this class understand this lesson plan or this instruction, the assistant to the class should have this information ahead of time. Otherwise, how's the assistant going to be prepared? Then what happens is, if there's a lack of preparation, there's a disconnect between the assistant and the lead teacher, and now they're going back and forth and things are just not prepared. Students who are having trouble are going to then have needs or make requests that are going to throw the lead teacher and the assistant teacher into a downward spiral, because they're just not organized or prepared for what the lesson can expect of the students. The students, as a result, are now reacting to the lack of shared interventions or shared time of instruction that the lead teacher and the assistant teacher are supposed to contribute somewhat equally. So let's say the class is listening to the lecture, the lead teacher is doing an amazing job, and we have one or two students who are falling off task. If the assistant is the assistant to the whole class, the assistant would be the one who goes to those students to get those students back on task, so those students can in fact continue to learn from the instruction without any interruption to the other students or nor derailing the lead teacher from the instructional value. Now, let's say we have two students in the class who are always at risk. The lead teacher would signal the prepared assistant teacher that although you're invested in all the students' instructional value, I really want you to hone in on these two, because if those two are off task, they bring everyone else off task. So what you're hearing is that the lead teacher and the teacher assistant really need to be coordinated before class starts. I just had a situation recently where the assistant teacher was directed by the lead teacher to run out of the class and go make copies quickly so that the lead teacher could get these handouts out to the students. We can't do that in the middle class. Those things need to be done before class, in the morning, at the end of the school day in preparation for tomorrow, etc. So when you think about what's going on as it relates to this relationship between the lead teacher and the teacher assistant, we're really talking about having a well-coordinated relationship so the assistant knows how to contribute responsibly to benefit the class as a whole. Now, what are the important values to this? The lead teacher is in control and is the leader of the class. And the lead teacher must coordinate with the assistant. As much as people put, and I've seen this, people put the ownership on the assistant, it's the lead teacher's class. You have to go to your assistant and say, listen, today, this is what we're going to try to get done. If we have a class that is an unruly class, they're just difficult students, today's goal might be, if we can establish behavioral expectations and just get kids buying into our behavioral management and have students just paying attention without seeking unnecessary distracting attention from their peers, that would be amazing, because if we get that done starting tomorrow, we can start to build out our instruction and it will have greater value. But if we don't have classroom management, we have no instructional value. With that being said, the assistant needs to know, well, then how does that work? So if a student goes into a crisis, do you want me to go to that student? Do you want to go to that student? And it is not uncommon that a lead teacher may say, I'll jump on that student to take that student by the hand to attend to the crisis because I know him or her so well. It's a complicated case, but I'm very connected with the family, whatever that might be. Or maybe the teacher has certain tools that work really well with that student. If those tools can be then transferred to the assistant teacher, that's ideal. It is the lead teacher's main goal to be the instructor of this valued instruction that delivers information, which we call content, through lesson planning that gets us to the end of the year goals, which are the curriculum standards, so that all students meet meaningful achievement through the school year. Now, another important value is school-wide expectations. The assistant to the class should know the school-wide expectations. So if you're following any of my videos, or you're a part of the schools that I've consulted for, or if you read my book, Coping and Accountability for Classroom and School-Wide Management, you'll see that the school-wide values or school-wide expectations are safe, responsible, and respectful, but they can change depending on your school. People have different ideas for their school-wide values. The assistant needs to know those expectations. Likewise, the lead teacher should be allowing the assistant to implement those, even though the lead teacher is maybe instructing in the beginning of class by prompting and reminding students. The assistant comes in on the back end and supports and reinforces that. So you notice it's almost like the assistant teacher is the logistics manager. They're twirling the plates. The lead teacher is setting up the plates and getting them ready to be twirled. And then lastly, the teacher assistant and the teacher assistant and the lead teacher need to meet at the end of the day, during prep time, in the morning of the next morning, or somewhere before the school day starts, or somewhere during the day where they can reflect on what's working and what's not working. The goals have to be achieved. So the lead teacher and the assistant teacher have to have this communication so they can discuss, what should we do going into tomorrow, and how should we either repeat what's working so we can sustain the value of our instruction, or maybe we should change things so we can do things differently to get the kids to respond differently. If those conversations don't happen, it is like a mom and a dad not on the same page again, and the child will find the hole or weakness in the lack of relationship and communication between these two teachers and take advantage of that. And that's not the student's fault. The student will be held responsible, but it's the adult's responsibility to build that integrity. So children are expected to challenge authority. They're expected to challenge boundaries. They're expected to take chances. So it's very important that we always remember that if this is what students or children are going to do, well, then we can't get mad at them. And if we're not coordinated or we lack communication, we also don't want to be mad at them either. So it is expected that will be some of the challenges that we will face working together as a team. I hope this worked out well for you. There will be more videos on assistant teachers for one student, assistant teachers for selected students. But I want to remind, lead teacher has control of that class. So if you need good management tools, we got to train you to be a manager of other people. Good luck, everybody. Appreciate you watching this video.